Hi everyone. Gee, we probably don't need this microphone. But Kerry and I have got really sore voices now because it's pretty loud in there, so we're not going to strain our voices and hold the microphone. So this, thank you for coming. So this session is basically about giving you some food for thought about looking after yourself, because you do a great job of looking after each other or other people, but maybe your self-care isn't as good as the care that you give to the other person. If we had a bigger group, I would have done this, but I'll just talk you through it. We ask people to rate themselves, or do 2 ratings. With the first one, we say, how good, between 0 and 10, where 0 is not very good and 10 is fabulous, what would you rate the level of care that you give to the person that you care for? And it's not in terms of output or result, it's about effort. And normally carers will be around the 8, 9, 10 mark. Yeah, you're nodding your head. And then we say, okay, fantastic. And it always happens. The ratings are always the same. And then we flip it and ask the carers to rate what their level of self-care is. And usually, what do you think it might be?
4 or 5.
Yeah.
Getting things through to him. I'm not ready.
So it is 4 or 5 if they're lucky. It's usually 1, 2, 3 or 4. So there's a real contrast between the level of care that a carer offers compared to their level of self-care. So that's usually a starting point to try and get the penny to drop with carers about how little they do care for themselves, and that in going ahead or moving forward, that they need to put in a little bit more effort into caring for themselves. Okay, Kerry.
So I think I might, do you mind if I go without, I can raise my voice? So people in the room, why do you think it's important to have self-care?
Because, like for myself personally, he looks after me physically, I look after his mentally.
Yeah.
Make all the appointments. Sometimes there's too much in my brain, and then by the time I do his appointments or my things, I haven't had time to go and do my teeth. The last thing I do is clean my teeth, have a wash before I leave.
Yeah, and it can be practical things like that as well, and it can be just taking time out for yourself. Why do you think it's important for self-care?
If you don't, you eventually burn out, and then ultimately affects the care that you give to others.
Yeah, exactly. So making the caring role sustainable by caring for yourself. We use an analogy, when you go onto the plane, and then the air hostess comes out and says, exit to the left, exit to the right, down the corridor, and then they go through the wearing the mask, and they say, so if the mask falls down and you're sitting with someone who is either younger than you, say a child, or someone that needs physical or mental support, who do you put the mask on first between you or the person sitting next to you?
Well, next year it's a child especially.
Yeah, exactly.
He needs help that doesn't know how to do it, because you can always rush and do it.
Yep. So what the actual answer today is that you have to put the mask on yourself, so then you can remain well and alert and enough oxygen in your mind to take care of the person. So we sort of like to talk about that it's similar to self-care. So if you sort of take on habits and activities of self-care, then like what you've said, then you're able to stay well and sustain your caring role. So that's a good way of sort of thinking about it, of always putting the oxygen mask on yourself first, and then you can assist the person that you support. Yes.
Normally you think, I'll help the child.
Yeah, and that's very typical of a mother or a carer or a father or a partner, to think, I must rush to supporting them. And then unfortunately that's why carers' emotional and mental health is impacted by the caring role. So yeah.
I find all the time with him, by the time I try to explain something to him, I'm worn out.
Yeah. So taking a break, taking time out, yeah, definitely.
So linked to that are what we call things that impact on a carer's ability to take care of themselves. So there are definitely things that are external pressures which stop you from taking care of yourself, to a good extent. And these are things that you're all familiar with. It's lack of time, competing demands, trying to juggle tasks, maybe trying to juggle a paid job or volunteer work as well, trying to spend time with other family members, the system not being as helpful as it could or should. So they're all external pressures, having to wait for appointments, all those things that are sort of out of our control. But sometimes the more powerful impact or factors are things that come from within us. So they are what we call our beliefs, and sometimes they can really hinder our ability to care for ourselves. So the first one is that I might point out is false guilt. Has anyone heard of that term? Any of you?
Is it when you blame yourself when something goes wrong because you didn't have time to get through? No?
It could be thought of that way, but not exactly. Well, let me ask you a better question. What's the difference between real guilt and false guilt? Yeah?
I think real guilt is if you actually are responsible for something, whereas false guilt is like you think you are, but you're not.
That's right. So real guilt, exactly. It's when you're responsible and something you have done or haven't done has, caused an impact onto another person. It could be harm or something like that. But false guilt is when you haven't actually done something wrong at all, but you feel guilty about it. So like what Kerry was saying before, taking time out for yourself. So, I'm going to go to this expo today and get someone else to take care of, my child with a disability. And while I'm here, I might feel a little bit guilty, like, oh, I'm actually having a nice time here. I'm enjoying a coffee. I'm getting to meet other carers. I'm having a bit of a laugh with service providers. It feels like I'm having too much of a good time. That's false guilt because I haven't actually done anything wrong, but I feel guilty because I feel like I'm putting my own needs, my own pleasure, my own self above the person I care for. But actually, it's important to feel good because, as Kerry said before, if you don't sustain yourself, then you're not going to be a good carer long term. So false guilt is one of those internal pressures or things that we put on ourselves that stop us from taking care of ourselves. Other things might be expectations. So I'm the eldest daughter or the eldest son, or I'm the mum or the dad, and this is my role. And I'm responsible for my child, sibling, etc., and no one else should have to do this. When actually you can share the care and it shouldn't just be down to one person. Another example might be that this is my lot in life and I don't deserve to have a massage or time out or go out to lunch because, this is it, this is my life and that I just have to live with that. So they're the kind of internal pressures or beliefs that can get in the way of us caring for ourselves. Does that make sense? So they're a bit hard to let go of, but I guess what we're just trying to do is just plant that seed and get you to see that actually sometimes it's not just external stuff that stops carers from looking after themselves, it can be their own beliefs which get in the way.
But mothers are like that too. So
I know.
maybe.
I know, it's very difficult. And as females as well, and if you're of a particular generation, those expectations might be very real and have been with you for 50 years. And so they're hard to shake off. But just, when you're feeling the false guilt, try and recognise that it is false guilt and that actually I've done nothing wrong. It's okay for me to have a nice time out at lunch, because that's going to help me be in a better mood when I get home, so I'll be a better carer.
So I guess those are some of the theories behind, and this is the part where, as the audience, as the bursting audience, to sort of think about some of the practical applications of self-care. So sort of generating some strategies for self-care. So you might sort of think about different categories. So that if you think about, you know, say 6 areas to our well-being, and they sort of talk about that if you at any one time sort of actively attend to 1 or 2 or 3 of these areas, or all of them, then you can sort of increase your sense of well-being. So for example, you know, body might be something to do with exercise, or moving, or you know, mind being reading. What do you think for feelings? What are some of the things that maybe you can sort of attend to around your own feelings as carers?
Feeling like that at the end of the day, okay, I got through it, I got through all the appointments, I've done a good job.
Yeah, so that's acknowledging your own feelings. Yeah, that's being self-aware.
I got through it, you know, all the appointments, whatever,
Yeah.
or, you know, I did get through it.
Relief.
Yeah,
Relief.
and you know, and also that can also come into, you know, the mind domain as well, taking care of your thoughts. So, you know, because as humans we tend to sort of lean towards the negative, and so sometimes it takes a little bit of extra effort to sort of acknowledge the small things and congratulate ourselves, just as you said, Faye, and sort of, yeah, acknowledge the small things in
And not
life.
take it up, like, say to yourself, okay, that's it, tomorrow's another day off, that's what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'll look at that tomorrow.
Yeah, great. And being kind to yourself is so important, isn't
Now I
it?
relax and watch TV.
Yeah, like sometimes, you know, I talk to myself a lot when I'm alone. And, you know, and it can be just talking myself through things, and sometimes that's a great way of externalising your thoughts as well. Yeah, spirit can be sort of religious side, or it can, you know, you can be sitting in your garden with a cup of tea, and that can be quite spiritual if you sort of become aware of nature and sort of feel that, you know, they talk about green therapy and the feeling of calmness. Yeah. Social life, meeting people, and creativity. So throwing it back into the crowd, do you want to share with me some of the things that maybe you do for self-care in these areas?
Well, for me, I used to go to St. Richard when I was a little girl.
Oh, you're right.
So I try to go every month. I'm so grateful to Carers Victoria.
Yeah.
Even we're going to drive there, we try to get there because that's my memory for this 1953, and I'm 73 now. And that's my monthly.
Yeah.
And it's not that I can't buy a ticket, but I met a lot of people over the years that belong to Carers.
Yeah.
And you know, we go and we see these same people. And
Yeah.
that's sort of nice too.
Yeah, that's really nice, and that sort of ticks a few boxes in there, doesn't it? Sort of having that peer support and connection
Other
with
people
people.
who are carers
Yeah.
too, you know, with their kids and stuff.
Yeah, brilliant.
That's why I'm grateful to Carers because that's only, you know, it might be a little bit of money, I suppose I could buy my own tickets, but I wouldn't be there with those people.
Yeah.
We've been meeting for years, you know. So.
Yeah.
And it's a sign of appreciation for what you're doing too. You know, what you're doing is validated.
And
They
they
are
must say,
saying.
you
And also, there's a lot about going to a movie too for a carer, that you're able to switch off for 2 hours and just have that time where your mind can just sort of leave all those issues that you have to deal with minute by minute or hour by hour, and turn the phone off. That's really good.
We also go to our church.
Oh, yeah.
Barry helps out with a group called Teenagers.
Yep.
And they like all up Barry because he cleans up the plates and gathers all the rubbish and puts their chairs back and everything. So we're there yesterday, I think it was. So we do that too, but it keeps him active physically because he's pretty.
Peace of mind.
And it also,
Peace of mind.
he also knows he's doing good. He does the same for the Salvation Army. So he doesn't get paid, he does volunteering. But he's volunteering with people that are worse off than us.
Yeah.
So we're mixing with those people too.
Yeah.
And I find that is helpful to mix with someone who, like, there's some coming with autism and all that. And when you see that, you just think, I'm all right.
Yeah, and also you're giving to someone, that's very nourishing, isn't it? To give to
Because
people is
it's
very
at all
rewarding.
here.
Yeah.
But cleaning place has giving, yeah,
So I
fantastic.
find that's good too.
Yeah, wonderful. Anybody else would like to contribute to maybe some area that you do for self-care?
I do love sport. I'm really
Yeah.
connected to my basketball club.
Yeah,
I play
great.
myself and I coach kids as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And I do yoga.
Ooh, good on you.
Nice.
But sometimes I don't have time to do yoga, and I find if I don't do it for a while, then I start thinking way too much about it.
Yeah. It's good though sometimes, isn't it, to move away from something that you do, which is great that you do it regularly, but it's almost like sometimes you have to move away to actually understand how beneficial it is and think, oh my God, this is what it's like without having all these activities in our lives. Yeah, and physical activity is just fantastic. Gets all your dopamines, all your feel chemicals moving, even if it's just a walk.
And if you don't do it, like for years I haven't done much physical, I used to be very fit. And then when you get an injury, you can't do it. So I try to still keep walking and doing a few things, but I can't do what I used to do. I'm 73.
Yeah.
But I always say, Barry does my exercise.
He does. Can you do my exercise too, Mary?
One of the things we say about these, about self-care too, is that it doesn't have to be expensive. You know, a lot of carers don't have a lot of money to spend to go to Dalesford to have a spa weekend, you know, although that'd be nice. It's just little things like you said before, Kerry, about having a cup of tea in the garden, doing yoga. I mean, you could be doing it in front of the telly, you know, following a video, or going to a community centre where it's free or very cheap, going to the movies, you know, they don't have to be really expensive, and they don't have to be big things.
Takes your mind away.
Exactly,
Yeah.
just little things, you know, little things throughout the day or throughout the week. You know, helping out like you do, Barry. It's, you know, social interaction, giving back, as you said, giving you some peace of mind. So money doesn't have to be a barrier to self-care.
And he grows a lot of our veggies.
Fantastic.
And he gives it to the Indians in the church and people in his gym and our doctor. So, and the more you pick, the more they grow.
That's right.
So if you don't pick the things, everyone knows Barry grows canola and spinach and all that sort of stuff and chilies. And the more you give away to someone, God knows that's good for your health too.
Yeah.
Oh, you could.
And the more comes in our garden.
The philosophy of growing veggies.
It's
It's true. Yeah. Watering is very therapeutic and relaxing. Yeah. But I think the main thing, the thing to understand too is that to do something is also to be conscious of your thoughts as well while you're doing it. So if I go for a run and I'm running going, oh my God, I've got to pay those bills, I've got to do this tomorrow, oh my God, and then I get to the other end, and so then I'm not actually relaxing my mind. So even if you're going for a walk, just check in with your thoughts and sort of, you know, am I thinking about yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow, or am I in the present moment, sort of relaxing.
And we've got a handout on that as
Yes.
well. Good too.
Yeah.
So do you next
Yeah.
one? So these are just some really general things about for self-care to work, you need these ingredients, you know. First of all, you need to value yourself. Sometimes carers feel that their life is less important than the person that they care for, or they put the person that they care for much higher, elevate their needs and stuff at the head of their own. But for self-care to work, you really need to value yourself. And you need to, oh, look at my typo there. Time out to. That's a new thing.
Yeah. Time out too.
Give yourself permission to take time out. That's what I was talking about before when, you know, that false belief of I should always be on and available. Well, you can't be, and you don't have to be. You're not superhuman. Commit to doing it and making it a habit. Apparently, it takes 28 days plus to make something a habit. So you've got to maybe, you know, put something on your fridge that says, don't forget to blah blah, take care of me, or have a cup of tea in the garden or whatever. And once you do it for a month, it becomes habitual. So when you don't do it, a bit like the yoga you were talking about, you miss it. And it must be doable. So that means it's got to be right for you. So, for example, I would love to think that I could go to the gym 3 times a week. But it's not really doable for me at this time of my life. And that's my excuse as well. But it's got to be the right time, it's got to be accessible, it's got to be affordable, it's got to work for you, it's got to be enjoyable too. If it's not enjoyable, you're less likely to do it. And then continue to do it. So it's got to be doable on a lot of levels. Find what makes you happy and give you that peace of mind, and then work from there, rather than following, everyone else who is, going to the gym 3 times a week, or taking a craft class. It's got to work for you. So they're just some general tips some practical tips on what you need to do to make it work, to make the self-care work.